Cast Off the Golden Chains by Melanie Brower. In the grand tradition of their Thursday night dinners together, Kassidy and her grandmother would retire to the fireside after their meal. Though Kassidy had long outgrown the fairy tales her grandmother told of the enchanted countryside of Scotland, she still enjoyed the ritual of drawing close to the fire while her grandmother whispered stories of her youth in the homeland. Kassidy knew that the magic her grandmother had experienced was about as real as Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Yet even as Kassidy grew up into a young woman, her grandmother would insist that magic is real, alive, and all around you. Maybe it would have been easier to believe in magic if she had grown up in the Scotland Highlands, where the fog saturates the hills with mystical enchantment. The angular industrial streets of Boston filled Kassidy with apathy rather than alluring her with mystery. When she was younger and her parents had begun fighting, she used to look in every tree in the park for any signs of the mythical creatures her grandmother swore existed. All she wanted was one wish, to make her parents stop fighting. But each time she'd return to their apartment, full of disappointment and eyes brimming with tears. This was the daily routine for weeks until one day her mom sat little Kassidy down to explain that there was no magic. No fairies, no kelpies, no elves, and yes, that means no Santa too, honey. I'm sorry I have to tell you, but I think you're big enough now to know the truth. I know it's hard on you when Mommy and Daddy fight, but you need to know it's not your fault. You also have to understand that there isn't a magic spell that can make me and your dad love each other again. But that doesn't mean we both don't love you very much. What Kassidy had learned that day years ago was that the magic of love was unfounded. The only so-called magic that had happened after that day was what her mom called the magic word, divorce. As much as she wished for some miraculous intervention to stop the dismantling of her precious family and life, she knew that there was no magic in the world. She couldn't even believe in justice. How could she believe in something as impossible as magic? If there was justice, the family court judge wouldn't have sentenced her to a life on the West Coast, Seattle to be specific, with her mom and new stepdad. The judge should have let her stay in Boston with her dad and grandma, the only people who truly cared about her. If there was real justice, someone should be punished for breaking their home in two. If there was real magic, her family would have never fallen apart in the first place. She swallowed hard, trying to rid herself of the bitter-tasting emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. All Kassidy could do at this point was treasure the last traditional Thursday dinner that she had left, so she could come back to this moment when she needed a lift in spirits in dreary, rainy Seattle. Kassidy gazed with nostalgia at every inch of her world that would soon only be a memory. She tried to commit each picture that adorned the large mantel over the fire to her mental collection. Faded pictures of her father and grandmother mixed flawlessly with brighter, glossy photos that chronicled Kassidy's youth. She wished she could finish her last 2 years of high school here. Prom, soccer pictures, graduation. There were so many more pictures she wanted to add to the collage. Kassidy breathed in deep, savoring the smells from dinner and the spicy cinnamon that her grandmother always added in heaping amounts to her tea. She didn't want to forget how it all felt. The warmth, the smells, everything. Most importantly, she didn't want to forget her grandmother. Kassidy studied her grandma, trying to memorize all the intricacies. The lilt in her voice, gentle wrinkles that creased in smile lines, that reached to her brilliant green eyes that shined with intelligence, kindness, and even a little mischief at times. Her grandmother resettled in her chairs and fixed her eyes on the hearth. She stared through the fire, revealing that her mind was far away. Gradually, her eyes began to brim with tears, and there seemed to be an inner battle brewing beneath the surface. With a slight hesitation, she leaned towards Kassidy. I want to tell you about my time in Scotland. You know I love your stories, but haven't you told them all by now? This is a wee bit different. It's a tale of love, loss, and leaving. It's about your grandfather. I was going to wait until you were a bit older, but it seems as though fate is separating me from the ones I love most, yet again. You can never escape your past. Even an ocean can't keep fate from intervening in our lives. Puzzled by the old woman's words, the pain that flickered in her eyes, and the sudden uneasiness of her grandmother's usual jovial spirit, Kassidy reached out to touch the old woman's hand in comfort. You know I would never leave you if I had a choice in the matter, but I'll be back, as much as I can, I promise. I won't have to be away for long and before I can come back to visit. I'm sure you will, dear. That's what I thought when I left Scotland. But in truth, I knew I could never go back and have things the way they were. She reached out to stroke the strawberry blonde locks of her beloved granddaughter. Her hair used to be the same brilliant shade, before stress and time had washed her hair with gray. The luminance of the blonde that blended with the red of the darker strands mixed to form a honey brilliance that caught the eye of her first love. She paused, reaching subconsciously to touch the bald spot that marred the back of her head. She pulled the nearest strand of her gray hair to obscure the bare skin self-consciously, struggling with where to start her tale. When I was younger, I fell in love with a beautiful young man, Colin McClellan, who was visiting his kin in my village. With smiles and secret glances across the market, we became endeared to one another. The day before the spring solstice, Colin finally gathered up his courage to approach me. His husky voice was steady and strong, but his hand trembled slightly as he handed me a garland of braided white flowers. He told me, "I spent all day yesterday thinking about you, so I made this for you. Wear it in your beautiful hair tonight in the spring festival, if you've been thinking of me too." I was overcome with excitement that evening as my mother helped me delicately weave the flowers into the intricate braids that piled on my head. My mother, your great-grandmother, whispered of how brides wear white flowers in their hair, hinting at her hopes for a proposal that evening. With such a charming and stunning man asking me to be on his arm for the evening, I thought this was true love calling me finally. On the night of the spring festival, we wandered out to a nearby hill to gaze at the moon and talk. There must have been sprites at work. Nothing else could explain the intoxicating rush of love that we both felt. In the weeks that followed, there was hardly a day that I was not visited by my dear Colin. We had a few nights where lovers do what lovers are meant to. But the whirlwind romance ended all too quickly as he left his relatives in my town for his home in the north once again. He told me, "I would never leave you if I didn't have to, but I promise I'll be back to claim your hand in marriage. You wore the garland I made for you. Now I want you to wear this as well." As he swore to his honorable intentions, Colin pulled a beautiful gold necklace from beneath his shirt and handed it to me, the metal still warm from his skin. He told me, "This is a sign of my everlasting love for you. One day soon we will be married and happy." The old woman pulled out a delicate gold necklace studded with a few rubies along its length for Kassidy to examine. She was quiet for a few minutes, reliving the memory of a salacious romance from her youth, before returning to her story. I waited loyally, kissing my necklace before sleep and praying he would return. Soon I was beginning to grow with a new life inside of me, your father's in fact. When Colin finally returned, however, it was with a new bride and her haggard old mother. While he avoided all contact with me, save for a few apologizing glances when we happened to cross each other, his mother-in-law was more direct. Cornering me in the market one day, she attempted to persuade me to give the necklace back to Colin. She told me, "You're but a wee lass, and no one blames you for being naive to the world and the real intentions of men. I know you thought Colin loved you, but in truth he just had cold feet about getting married. I'm sorry a respectable young girl could get so caught up in such a dishonorable thing as a tryst. Now you're a sensible girl. Just give back the necklace. He's married now, and the necklace rightfully belongs to the new Mrs. McClellan, my daughter." After I had refused, she began to openly berate me and demanded that I return the precious family heirloom. She said, "It's my daughter's marriage right, and I won't have a hussy like you dishonoring the family my daughter is now a part of." The necklace was the only remnant of the love I thought would last forever. I couldn't give it up so easily. Of course, I was also hoping to spite Colin enough to make him confront me himself. After I told her I'd give up the necklace over my dead body, the old hag said she'd curse me, my children, and my children's children with loneliness and shame until I'd return the necklace. But I would not, could not, allow his child to grow up without a trace of his father. As I turned to leave, the old hag's surprisingly nimble hand shot out towards the necklace dangling around my neck. I turned my body to protect it from her gnarled fingers. Instead, she grabbed a chunk of my precious hair, which held a garland of white flowers like the one Colin had given me in the spring. I screamed as she wrenched my hair, ripping it from my head. "I warned you to give the necklace, but you wouldn't listen to reason. I will not rest until I tear it from your cold, dead hands, and this hair will guarantee that I'll be able to find you wherever you are when you take your last breath." The old wrinkled fingers clipped shut around the